welcome and thank my team here in Aventura. So if I can have Michelle, Heidi, and John. And if I can also have my fearless leader, Louis, for just a quick moment. So I always like to start off these events with just a thank you and just show my team of support. So we have Michelle, who is a branch quality manager. We have Heidi, who is one of our bankers, and we have Jonathan as well, who is one of our bankers. And then we have Louis Grau, who is our lead manager for all of business banking, international banking. And then we also have Sen Obro, who is board of directors for Banesco USA. So with that being said, we're going to start to get the panel kicked off, and I'll be passing the floor over briefly to Juan.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I don't think I really need to add too much to that. So just while we are letting everybody from the webinar world to come in, I want to thank you guys for coming. We will have people coming in during the webinar. That's fine. We've got Miami traffic and people coming in. This is exciting for us. We want to make sure that we engage with the community in a way that showcases who we are. And who we are is a lot of different things. Being a commercial bank, it's about the business, it's about the people behind the business, the projects, and all of the different things that have to come together to make things happen and result in change. So we're very lucky to have some amazing panelists and the support of our leadership team. And we also have some great original material that we've created with their help as far as industry research that we will also be sharing with you. So most of you have left your emails. If you have not, we'll be in touch with you. Please do so that we can connect. Please come in and continue to know what Banesco is about. This is our 15th year. We're very proud to be here. Second year, third year in Aventura, actually. Last year, I know, almost didn't count because of COVID, but we're very happy to be here and be a part of the community, and we want to continue growing with you. So thank you for being here. Let me turn it back to Paul, and let's officially kick off the webinar and have you introduce our distinguished panelists and guests. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. First off, I would like to introduce everyone to Ariel DeRay. Deichmann, I am so sorry. Yes, she recently got married. So definitely would like to welcome, and what I would like to do is just briefly pass the microphone to each of the panelists just to do a quick introduction. Thank you, Juan. Just so they could briefly introduce themselves prior to beginning the actual panel. Yep. Oh, just introduce yourself. Yes, who you are and where you come from.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ariel Deichmann, now formerly DeRay. So those of you who know me from Federation or legal circles, the name has changed. I am a trial lawyer. I work at Saul, Ewing, Arnstein, and Lair at the Fort Lauderdale location. I predominantly deal with commercial litigation. So any business that has a problem, whether it's a fund, a brokerage, anything along those lines, I solve those problems. Hopefully you don't have to use me, but if you do, I tend to win. So I'm involved locally in Jewish Federation of Broward, which I know is a proud sponsor of this event. I think it's very important for professionals to be involved in their communities, especially because I'm from Broward. So I take a lot of pride in South Florida, and I like to give back to our community, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Joshua Deichmann, similar to that one over there, also known as Her Biggest Win. Just so you know, yeah, so I'm not from here originally. I moved here about 4 years ago from Phoenix, Arizona, and I started buying a couple of properties in Broward County, and noticed that the folks that I was using as my real estate professionals weren't as knowledgeable as I would have liked. And so I got my real estate license and started doing my own deals and then third-party deals, and started a brokerage company called Level Realty in January of 2020. And it's grown quite a bit of legs, and we have a fair amount of market share and some really good people up in Broward County mainly. But I moved here for my father. He had retired down here, and had a couple of development projects to work on. I moved here at the end of 2017. Prior to that, I was working for a company in Scottsdale, actually, that was building childcare facilities all across the country. And so I moved here to work with him on a couple of new development projects and spent, 3 or 4 years in entitlements, and, that got bored, and that's why we started Level. But, now we're doing a couple of ground up new development projects in Oakland Park, a couple of adaptive reuse ones we just finished as well. And, we're growing the brokerage firm and trying to build the team.
I learned some new things today, Josh. I did not know that. You two I knew, but I didn't know you got here 4 years ago. So that's good. I also just got here about 4 years ago, but I have lived in Florida once before. And then I left, and about 20 years later came back. So I had a little time off in Florida, but I missed it. My name is Andre Benin. I am an international tax partner with Markham LLP. Markham's one of the biggest accounting firms in the country, top 15. And I head up the national practice for international tax issues. So anything that crosses borders, it includes real estate, but it includes anything else that crosses borders that has to deal with tax. So I'll try not to bore any of you, put any of you to sleep. I'll try not to do anything too tax geeky, but I'm sure I've got some points of information that are worth hearing about. And that's me.
Good afternoon. My name is Abraham Sinobril. I go by Seno. I'm originally from the Netherlands. As maybe some you can recognize the accent there. I've been in Aventura for 21 years. I have been on the board of directors of Banesco for 9 years. And I'm very happy also on behalf of Banesco that you guys are all here.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen, and distinguished lady. Thank you. All righty. So to get into some of these wonderful questions, obviously this is a panel surrounding the commercial real estate and how the market is currently running. So I have my first question for Josh. So Josh, if you can kind of just give me some feedback, the first thing I would really like our guests to kind of learn and understand is the current situation right now with the market is high prices, and we're starting to see bidding wars. Can you kind of explain your perspective on that and some of the reasons as to why we're starting to see such a crazy change of events here in South Florida?
Well, most people are, I guess, most familiar with residential, houses and bidding wars and all that stuff. And the only comment that I'll make on that before talking about some commercial properties is that, we have had a shortage of inventory now for a year and a half, and it's not getting that much better. And we haven't even had the foreign travel that we've had in the years prior. So just imagine that all of that, lack of supply and increased demand that we've experienced is without the Canadians that come down here, is without the people from Venezuela, the people from, other, countries in South America and Europe, right? I think as soon as the international travel opens, it's actually going to get a lot worse, not better. And I just, I want to try to squash the rumors of, once eviction moratoriums get lifted and foreclosure moratoriums, or foreclosures start going through, that there will be more inventory. There won't be. This, relocating a family or an individual from one structure to another doesn't change absorption, right? It doesn't increase the supply. And so, once those things happen, yes, it'll cause a couple of changes, but it's not going to increase the amount of supply that's available. So I think it's actually going to get a lot worse in the terms of supply before it gets better. But we're also seeing that a lot in my world on commercial real estate. I want to give a little example of a small 1,500 square foot warehouse that we took out to market. We had a tenant vacate and took it out. We were asking for $18.18 a square foot, 1 and 3 years on the lease term, and usually about 3% annual increases. We had a 3-party bidding war, ended up at $19.50 a square foot, 5% annual increases for 10 years, right? It's absurd, right? And this is in Oakland Park, Florida, and not on a main road, not on a singled intersection, traffic count of a couple hundred. And we're getting higher rents now for industrial property than we're getting for some of the office on Federal Highway in US 1, right? 100,000 vehicles per day. And so we're seeing a really cool shift, in demand. And that's not to say that there's a lower demand for office. We actually have right now higher occupancy in our office spaces than we had pre-COVID. Right? It's just a little different. Smaller spaces, a little bit lower prices, a couple more landlord concessions. But one of the things we did was we moved in a PPP lender and got all the tenants, hooked up with PPP loans to pay rent and everything. And we've been able to maintain fairly steady occupancy during the pandemic. But I think as far as absorption and bidding wars and all that stuff goes, it's going to get a lot worse from residential before it gets better. And for commercial, seeing more and more demand, we're getting more and more offers on property. Things are staying online, shorter and shorter periods. And it's harder to get, third-party inventory right now for the brokerage stuff.
No, that's wonderful insight. As a follow-up to that question, now, the inventory that we see that is being purchased and that are causing these bidding wars, would you see this to be coming from a domestic individual, or is this an international individual that is purely using the market for investment?
I'm seeing a little bit of both. We handle a lot of business sales, and one of our business sales agents is actually with us today, and he's talking to EB5 buyers and foreign buyers all the time. But for most of the leases, we're seeing them for new business owners from out of town. A lot of people from New York, trying to relocate a business down here that has an established business up there. One of the deals that we were working on was a restaurant group that had 8 locations around, Manhattan and Long Island, and placed them right in Fort Lauderdale.
So as we're hearing, it's not just our domestic, and when I say domestic, we're talking about continental United States, but we also have a lot of our northern folks, basically caused by the pandemic, that have moved down to South Florida, which is causing the race for real estate, if you will, right? Sorry, thank you. Now, with that being said, I kind of wanted to pass it over to Ariel. Josh had mentioned briefly just, some of the changes and COVID. Now, as a developer, Josh took a wonderful route in becoming a PPP lender to help support his tenants. Now, can you give us a little bit of insight as to what the COVID pandemic has done in terms of real estate and litigation, and I guess also how that's played with our residential and commercial properties with business condos and HOAs?
Sure. So I think the predominant thing that's happened as a result of COVID is delay, as everyone's seen. So whether you're a developer and you're trying to push a site plan approval through in any municipality, whether you are a landlord trying to place a tenant and the business has been shut down for many, many months, the real issue is delay. We see that in courts as well. Right now, I believe all 3 courts in Tri-County area, Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach, within the last couple of weeks have only resumed jury trials. So, I have many clients who they've had these cases that have been languishing now for a couple of years, real estate related cases. It's a little difficult to push things through because on the one hand, you don't necessarily want to give up your right to a jury trial. On the other hand, in this business, as in most, time is money. And every day that goes by, every day that ticks off the calendar is dollars. So there's a little bit of tension between those 2 concepts that's going on right now. You mentioned homeowners associations, condominium associations. Both of those entities are driven by assessment revenue. And what's happening, and I haven't seen this manifest in litigation just yet, but I think it might be coming, are issues relating to tenants, both on the commercial side and the residential side, not paying assessments, whether it's because they don't have the ability to, because they haven't been working, or because they don't feel that they're getting value for the assessments because they've had their amenities and common areas shut down as a matter of public health and safety. So I think we're going to start to see some issues that arise out of that. From the lending side, lenders lend oftentimes based on income stream and revenue. And so when an association, whether it's a condominium association, homeowners association, or even a commercial condo, looks to get funding, and they're looking to the banks to do that, the banks are saying, okay, well, show me your books. And they're taking out their books. And I think they're going to start to see a decrease in revenue stream, and it's going to start to be a little bit of a problem. That said, I work in the litigation world, so I can't necessarily speak too much to the transactional side, but what I've seen also are issues relating to rights that are granted under a declaration of covenants, and how residents are reacting to restrictions on those rights. As an example, an issue I'm dealing with now is for elections. If you're an association and your documents mandate that you have an annual election, what happens if you can't have a physical election? You have some owners, especially in some of the very high-end buildings, they've got millions of dollars invested in whether it's a residence or a commercial condo. They want to be able to participate in the process, to see with their own eyes votes being counted, to be able to verify the integrity of the process. And you're seeing that it's becoming a bit of an issue because a lot of the associations want to have virtual meetings. So you're starting to see a little bit of tension. Hopefully, as the pandemic resolves itself, these things won't manifest into litigation, but those are just a couple of things that we've been seeing so far.
That's very interesting. I appreciate that. Now, Seno, I have a question for you. As Ariel had briefly mentioned, these institutions are always looking for a sense of finance for their projects and to make improvements. Now, can you give us a little insight as to your view on how credit has evolved throughout the pandemic period, and where you kind of potentially foresee credit impacting these businesses as we're starting to emerge out of the pandemic? Thank you. Now, there was, in regards to the restaurant industry and how everything has been booming. Now, can you give us a sense of insight as to what your perspective is when we do have this international inflow of visitors coming into here in Aventura? What you think how that's gonna impact our community?
It's interesting. I just went a couple of days ago to a new restaurant that I had gone to 3 years ago in Brooklyn, and I recommend it. It's called Easy's, and it's the best brisket ever. So if you like brisket, go to Easy's. And I'm not a shareholder, but I was very lucky to happy to see that they opened here in the waterways. And as it happened, I found out that they were actually opened on the second day, and it was full on the second day. And one of the reasons I think it was full is because it's very well known in New York. And as mentioned, we have so many New Yorkers coming to this place, and specifically to Aventura. So they knew what it is. Now, generally, I want to say about restaurants and financing. Financing restaurants is very difficult for banks. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy thing. But in generally, when it comes to Aventura, I'm very, very positive about Aventura. And I would say that when we talk Aventura, you will see in the next couple of years that Ojas, Hallandale Beach, will all become part of the big Aventura. Because there's very limited space available in Aventura. Although, as I've mentioned to our colleagues, when I drive around Aventura, I'm suddenly surprised that there is a new piece of land that I never knew existed, and suddenly they're building something else. But grosso modo, there is very limited availability in Aventura. So I expect that over the next couple of years, what we call Aventura will include parts of the surroundings. It's a high spending area, it's high income area, and I think that the retail business will, and specifically restaurants, will keep growing extremely well.
Wonderful. Now, well, that brisket definitely sounds like a deal. But in regards to that, no, I can definitely understand that. And you're right. Here in Aventura, we're seeing a new building pop up almost every day. Just go back 2.5 to 3 years, this building that we are currently in wasn't even constructed. So you're absolutely right. We're starting to see new construction popping up in different places.
Well, yeah, people are imaginative. There is just around the corner, there is a synagogue, and they made a deal with a huge parking lot, and it's the Chabad of Aventura, and they made a deal with the developer. They changed where the synagogue was on Biscayne Boulevard. They moved it to on the inside, on this street right here. And then on the other side where the synagogue was, they're going to build a huge building. Next to it, there was a funeral home. It's torn down, and there is a huge development coming there as well, by the way, with a lot of restaurants. So yes, they find space and land all the time.
Now, with all this construction that is happening here in Aventura, do you feel like the inflow of visitors are going to negatively impact or potentially positively impact not only just the real estate market as a whole, but how would you see it also affecting the resources?
What do you mean by resources?
Resources in the sense of, obviously, as here as locals, we are competing for commercial and residential real estate. Do you see that as a potential negative impact to our community?
No, I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a positive, it's new blood. But I just want to come back and follow your question on the supply. You know, just for those of us, we all nearby. If you just go to just across the borderline of Miami-Dade and Broward, Gulf Street, opposite Gulf Street. You know, next time you drive by, look at it. And then in 5 years, look at it again. And it will be full of buildings, and it will be totally different. So what I'm saying, literally the city of Aventura, there may be limited space. But I believe that the supply around Aventura, we're going to have a lot of construction going on.
Thank you for that. Now, Andre, this question goes to you. We've had obviously some conversation so far in this panel in regards to international domestic investment real estate. Would you be able to give me just a little bit of insight as to how you and your firm are assisting our international buyers who are also potentially partnered with a domestic buyer in terms of finance, tax? Can you just give me some insight as to how you manage and work with those clients?
Sure, Paul. So, you know, as we said, there are a lot of deals being syndicated, and a lot of the deals being syndicated are getting investments from the US, but they're getting other investment from abroad. There's a lot of money abroad. There's a lot of those who want to invest into the US, but a lot of the foreign investors want to be disconnected from that investment, right? Nobody wants to file a US tax return when you don't live here. They're scared of the IRS. I'm not sure that they're wrong to think that, to be honest. But, you know, there's this idea, we would love to be a part of the American economy, but we don't want to be too close. And the problem is that each investor has different goals. US investors, you know, they always want to make sure that whatever their exit is long-term capital gain, right? Because nobody wants to pay the ordinary rates. Foreign investors sometimes want to just ensure they don't have to file. And sometimes they'll pay tax not to have to file. And in other cases, they also want to protect some of their other foreign interests. so I don't want to get too tax geeky. I'm not going to do that. But for foreigners who invest in US properties, if God forbid something happens to them, the estate tax that we know about with the big exemptions of $11 million, it doesn't apply to them. They get 60,000 of exemption. So if you're a big, if you're investing real money into the US and you're not protected on the estate side, God forbid something happens, it's a 40% tax on basically the whole fair market value of the US investment. So that's something they think about much more than the US investors who have a bigger exemption that sort of, helps them. So we have to plan for that for them. We also want to plan on reducing their tax as much as possible. Foreign investors, when they invest in US real estate and that property gets sold, the US government gets very scared that they're not going to get their money from the foreign investor. So at the closing, if you've ever done one of these with a foreign investor, at the closing, a foreign seller, they take a big chunk of the proceeds and they withhold it from the investor. And they don't know how much the gain's going to be. So they just say, depending on the value of the property sold, 10 to 15% of the value allocable to them is just withheld. And then you can go file a return. And if it's less than that, we'll give you the money back. But if you're foreign investors, nobody wants to hand over 15% of the proceeds, which could be a year or two, because by the time the IRS actually looks at all this and agrees with you, it could be forever. So, when we structure these deals, we have to dance a dance that matches what the US investors want and matches what the foreign investors want. And if you can't get that in place correctly, then your numbers don't look right because there's tax being paid for no reason. It affects your ability to finance. You don't have the right entities who are going to be signing on the dotted line or the directors on behalf of the right entities. So you really need to do this up front and quickly if the deal is going to be a short deal to really make sure that you've got the right investment, the right protections for the different kind of parties, that you have the right entities who can sign the right contracts, that you reduce tax so that the banks want to lend you the most because the ROI is there post-tax. So really it's a big deal in sort of all those different stages. And I know I went too far, but I couldn't help it.
No,
Sorry.
that's very insightful. Sometimes the more is better. And in
That's
this
okay.
case, obviously, just as we are here as Finesco, we focus on these types of clients. So for us understanding this and for our community to understand some of this insight is very powerful. Now, with your international and domestic clientele that are currently in projects doing development deals. Now, can you give us some insight on how they can get qualified for a tax credit due to a zoning location or how they're able to recoup some of these benefits when there comes to any kind of taxation?
Yeah, I think the common ones people may have heard of, one of them is called the cost segregation study, where you take the value of what you're buying and you can say that some of the assets have a shorter depreciation life. So you get bigger deductions, basically. Sometimes in today's day and age, you can get an immediate expensing on certain parts of the buy. So that's helpful. I don't know if you guys were aware, but with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there are these opportunity zone funds. I'm not sure if people here are familiar, but it allows, it's really a nice idea that it allows for investment in certain areas that are designated zones for improvement. And by doing that, number one, you can defer the tax on the gain from an investment you're getting out of when you go into one of those zones. But also, if you can hold on to your investment in that zone for 10 years, the full future gain on that investment is exempt from tax. And that, of course, gives benefit to those investing, but gives benefit to the community in the areas they need it most. Now, for foreigners, it's harder to get all those things. It can be done. But again, that's where you call somebody like me and say, how do I get the same benefits that the domestic counterparts get if I'm getting foreign investment? And if you're setting up that fund and you want to attract foreign investors, then you should think about that beforehand. So when you market to them, you already look like the kind of investment they want to invest in.
Wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, with that zoning question, I definitely would like to kind of pass it back to Josh. So Josh, a few things that we have kind of going on in the community that people are continuously talking about is CRA, community reinvestment, affordable living, affordable retail space, commercial space. As a developer in Oakland Park, just from my experience, knowing a little bit about your projects, can you give me a little bit of insight as to how you move into a market, you figure out the zone, if this is going to be something that is viable for you, and how is it that you kind of put your your spin on what is going to be the pricing that you're going to be setting for these spaces.
Okay. I actually want to hear more about qualified opportunity funds. So I'm going to get, well, I think that is going to be dependent upon the developer, right? I'll use our project as an example. There are no low-income housing units. There are no market rate, credits, anything like that for the units that we're building. However, in the entire city of Oakland Park, and this was 2 months ago when we did the groundbreaking that I looked this up, but there were some total 10 properties for rent for under $2,000 a month. House, townhouse, apartment, doesn't matter, whatever, anything. And 6 of them were west of 95. 2 of them were in a neighborhood called North Andrews Gardens, which is up and coming. And then there's another, 2 that were in garden style apartment building converted from 2 bedrooms, little highly style conversion, no amenities.
Mhm.
And anyway, not somewhere that you want to live. And if you're a young professional that just started working at Markham, you making $50,000, $60,000 a year, you can't live in the city of Oakland Park. You can't. There's nothing there. And furthermore, you're going to want a gym, right? You're going to want an amenity, a pool, something, And so that's what we're providing is, that there's a hole in that market for this product,
Mhm.
right? And what we are doing to achieve, affordable prices for everybody is not going through tax credits or anything else. It's we're building more efficient units,
Mhm.
right? We have, a couple of floor plans that are 500 square feet, 1 bedrooms, right? And they're roomy and they're laid out properly, right? We spent a lot of time, effort, and energy in interior design, right? To lay out the units so that they're more efficient, and worked with the city to, measure units, in ways that haven't been done before, paint to paint versus center line of the wall, things of that nature that really help make the building more efficient, and that breadth keeps the cost down for the end user. And so we'll be able to bring out a brand new apartment that's never been lived in before to the public for $1,400 a month, and
That's impressive.
right now there's nothing like it there. That, also where we're putting it was existing surface parking. There was nothing else there other than, some crime and some homelessness, right?
Mhm.
But it's across the street in one direction from the culture room, and fairly successful Smoothie King, and a couple new tenants that are moving in that Level helped place in the shopping center on that side. On the other corner, we just moved in a 4,800 square foot yoga studio. There's a taco place, a pizza place, and a lot of small businesses that support this. And then on the northeast corner, there's Target, AMC movie theaters, Publix, GNC, a lot of infrastructure close by that will help support, these apartments, and the ground floor retail that we're putting there is also going to help, right? Because we're coming up not only 274 units, but also 19,000 square feet of retail. And, it's in essence placemaking, right? Right now, if you drive on that corner at night, there's nobody there but me. Sorry. Right? At 11 p.m., I'm the only one there, in 2 years from now, there's going to be hundreds of people there, at 11 p.m. And eyes and people who care about the neighborhood because they live there, that are walking to the grocery store across the street instead of driving and filling up that parking lot. And, and I know your question was more so about CRA, but the purpose of CRAs is to accomplish this thing. And a lot of communities need those. But we're very fortunate here in South Florida. We've been talking about all the restaurants. right? The people, the desire to be here, you know, that the money, the capital is here, right? And Benesco will give it to you if you ask them. And, you know, so if you can build smartly, you know, you don't always need, you know, the CRAs. I have not actually used any CRA funds or community funds for projects, but my father, I got to work with him hand in hand in Pennsylvania when he did a few. And they, you know, came out very well. Adaptive reuse of historic buildings that were run down and condemned. And, you know, for projects like that, when you need to motivate the community to do the work, it's useful. Here, we struggle to find the land to do it. You know, there's a shortage here. There's more demand. And so we don't need them as much in the community here. That's been my
Okay.
experience.
Now, when you're doing some of these projects, I guess if you could kind of explain some of the difficulties that you kind of face with some of your projects in terms of construction, cost, you know, supply, so the supply chain has been disrupted, right? You know, we've said that on many different levels so far today. Would you mind kind of just giving us a little insight into a developer's perspective as to how that affects your bottom line and how that could potentially affect your project and any potential litigation issues that may arise?
I'm going to defer the litigation questions to
I'm gonna refer
my
that to her.
in-house counsel.
I don't represent them. That is in no way a representation.
In-house meaning our home. But yeah, supply chain issues are becoming a problem. Really, it takes just more effective planning. The issue that we're running into now is people erring on the side of conservative, right? So when you're taking a bid from a contractor that is worried about there being a supply chain issue, they're going to pad the numbers, right? Unfortunately, once you contract with that number, it's not going to go down, right? It's only going to go up. So, you know, the cost of construction has gone up, you know, pretty drastically. However, rents have also gone up. Sale prices have also gone up. Demand has gone up too. So right now, the market is still absorbing everything that's being delivered to it at rates that afford the cost of the construction. Should that change, you know, we're going to have a problem. But right now, we're looking at 9-month lead times for refrigerators. So we need to order them 12 months in advance, right? And so with effective planning and the right team around you, you know, you can overcome those hurdles. But yes, it does increase cost. We're just fortunate right now that the income, you know, that those properties are generating also helps offset that increased cost. But as far as litigation for suppliers not delivering materials on time, that was part of the conversation on our ride here today. So I'll defer to the best attorney I know.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so this is kind of a loaded question. Thank you. Thank you. But I would say first and foremost, as it relates to the development world, knowing your zoning and unlocking the city's code, in my view, is so often overlooked and is critical at the early stages of especially if you are a foreign investor. You may be investing in, and as Andre mentioned earlier, oftentimes you want a passive investment. And you may be investing in something sight unseen, and you don't know the difference between OGIS and Aventura from Hollywood or Dania or any other of the neighboring communities. And so it's very important to understand, what can I actually build here? It drives the price, it drives the consumer, which ultimately drives the profit of your development. So that's very important. Something that I've seen often in cases, development projects that go to litigation, is that if only they would have evaluated the zoning with their own team, not relying necessarily upon the city. The city does the best it can, but you have to understand the city is run by staff, not lawyers, not accountants, not brokerages and anything of the sort. So while it's helpful to call the city and learn all you can about what the city claims its code will allow, building as of right, which means you have a right to build that particular thing in that particular place without asking the city for permission, a variance to build something else. So what I've often seen is clients don't assemble the team early on enough. You need to work with people that have a track record of success. Have you built something like this before? As much as we all want to give a growing business an opportunity, you hate to be the guinea pig in something that oftentimes is involving a substantial sum of money. So that's super important. There are ways, and I'm not a transactional lawyer, but obviously I work with contracts every day. There are ways that you can potentially structure your deals so that they are or are not titled to site plan approval. And I just want to kind of decode a lot of the alphabet soup, right? ARC, P&Z, DRC, what do these all mean? Essentially, it's all on a basic level. What can I build here? What kind of uses can go here? Can people live here? Can people shop here? Can people eat here? All of those sorts of things. So knowing that early on, I think helps avoid litigation. And if you're there, it's always helpful to say, I assembled a professional team at the early stages, and that's what I relied on to make these decisions for me, to help guide me through these decisions. As it relates to the supply chain issues, as I mentioned earlier, delay, it's the hugest money waster, but it's what we're experiencing so much now, and so many factors that are out of our control. So some things that we're seeing with supply chain issues, like Josh mentioned, you're ordering 200 refrigerators from GE. When can I get those refrigerators? On the developer side, is my contract a fixed price contract or a variable price contract? Did I say I would pay X amount of dollars for these refrigerators untethered to whatever the cost fluctuations are? So there are some creative things you can do. I've seen even hybrid agreements that are a variable with a cap. You sometimes see that on the lending side too, a variable rate that has a ceiling. So I think that what we're going to start seeing a lot in terms of litigation is when a product becomes either so expensive or so delayed that either the seller or buyer no longer wants to participate in the transaction. I think a lot of those deals are going to end up in court because oftentimes it may be impossible to perform because you just don't have the product. Other times it may be, I could do it, but it's so cost ineffective for me to do that. I would rather breach the contract and let it go to court. So you're seeing kind of a lot of that. And I think you'll see more and more of that as the supply chain issues continue to work their way down the conveyor belt, so to speak. So I don't think that's something that's necessarily going to be going away soon. But I do think that there are some creative ways that you can try to contract around those sorts of issues.
Thank you. Now, when we have a situation like that, and I feel like most of us we always try to be as risk adverse as possible with all of our industries. Now, in a regard like that, when you have investors that are investors and developers working together, can you give us some insight or I guess some advice that you would give your clients on some steps or team to have in place to make sure that any kind of contractual agreement doesn't end up in litigation, or making sure that it doesn't affect their loan request with a financial institution? Can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Sure. Everything is so fact driven in this world. I can't give specific advice as to something particular, but what I can tell you is it depends on what you're trying to build. At bottom, any kind of development, you typically have your architect, lawyer, tax professional, even business consultants. It just depends on what you're trying to build. For example, if you're building a hotel, oftentimes you have a hospitality consultant that's going to analyze the demographic, tell you whether your hotel could succeed here or not. And all parties really are interested in seeing that the transaction comes to fruition and seeing something actually be built, whether it's seller, buyer, lender. Nobody wants the project to be tied up in litigation for years because nobody wins in that scenario. So in terms of who should you have on your team, it depends on the project. But I think that the more people that you have in your corner at the beginning, although it is more expensive, of course, and that's the drawback. A lot of people don't want to spend that money up front, but I can tell you that litigation is way more expensive than any of that will ever be. So it's important to have good people in your corner with proven track record of success that can kind of coach you and tell you, even in a non-COVID world, a project with Sunny Isles typically takes X. A project with Aventura typically takes Y. And cities are not created equally. They all have very different timelines. Some have a more robust staff. Others are more light on staff. So these are all things that are important to know up front. As far as you mentioned risk avoidance, The more things that you can control contractually are better typically. So the more kind of ambiguity that you leave in the agreement, while it does give you some wiggle room, should you ever get to a litigation, you don't have control of particular things. So as many things that you can control for in your contract tends to have an opposite effect on your risk, eliminates your risk a little bit. If you can say, I understand that the price of this product might go up by X dollars per square foot. I know it's never going to reach more than $7 or whatever the price may be. You at least know what your ceiling is going to be. And that not only helps you with risk in terms of litigation, but it helps you when you're doing your pro formas and your financial documents and you're trying to get investors. And you can say, look, the variables may change, but we're looking at X, which would result in Y of a potential profit down the road, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Some very good insight there. My next question is going to pass over to Andre. So as we're learning about getting a team in place, Andre, and understanding what the needs are of the client, can you kind of give us your perspective on the taxation aspect of the best ways to speed up a process for a client, or assisting them with modeling out their projections on these type of transactions?
Sure. So first thing is, a lot of times people in this industry will knock on my door and say, I got a perfect property. I got to close in a week. And you're like, great. Well, what you're going to need to close in a week is like 3 weeks of work, right? You want to model out different options for tax. You want this, you want that, but you have 5 days. So what I often end up doing is I have to be realistic. If they're really going to close, we can say to them, tell me who the investors are going to be or who you think the investors are going to be. What if we do something that lets you start now and has flexibility built into it that we could close in a week and then make these determinations over the coming month, let's say, and then, make elections and do things retroactive to when you bought that gives you the final structure. And I think that in this industry, you need flexibility because you don't have time. And the true time it takes is longer than often you get. So the first thing is, do call the tax advisor before you buy, because even if they can't tell you the best answer in 2 days, they can tell you what way will give you the most flexibility to let us answer that question over the next month or two and not affect your ability to buy today. And I think that's step one. The rest of it that you mentioned sort of comes after. It's okay, you bought the property, you have flexibility. Now the question is going to become, what do we do with that flexibility? Which way do we want to go? And we start to model out all those things. And sometimes, to be honest with you, the clients don't know all the numbers, right? I can only crunch numbers if you give me something to crunch. If I say, what do you expect this to be? And you say, I don't know, I haven't thought about it. And I said, well, that's not a math number. I can't tell you how that's going to look, So, and so we go back and forth and we sort of develop that together. And those projections ultimately get you where you want to be. And sometimes that happens between when you bought the property and sometime between then and when you actually file a tax return for that structure a year and a half later, because I'm going to get an extension, you do it for a while later. So I think that's important, but we do as much as we can right away. And sometimes the banks want to see as much as possible on projections right away.
Mhm.
And that's why what Ariel was saying, where if you've got caps, at least we could say, well, based on the caps, this is worst case scenario, right? And so we all sort of end up coming together to create something that gets the bank to say, okay, I can see return on investment. I get it. You can pay this debt. I'm comfortable. She could say, great. I think this is some mitigated risk here with some caps. And I could say, well, you gave me some numbers to work with, so I think I can do it. And the really only issue is exactly what Ariel said, which is it's hard to get someone to spend money up front.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to wait till the money's coming in to spend the money on the people. But unfortunately, to some extent, you really can't do that. So it's always a give and take. So it's a give and take.
Now, thank you for that, Andre. I kind of would like to actually pass the question actually rolling into Seno. So after hearing, the suggestions from these professionals, on the bank end, when it comes to credit, this is definitely one of the biggest asks of all of our clients. Now, can you give us what your perspective or what your best tips would be for these individuals who are moving into commercial real estate and coming to a Banesco, another institution per se, for financing? What would your suggestion be for those clients in terms of their homework and their understanding of what they're going to be getting into?
The important thing for a bank like Banesco is the relationship. We're not a national bank that does, they have a checklist and they go down the checklist. I have a friend who is asking for loans right now, and they're asking ridiculous questions which make no sense. And it's a cookie cutting. I mean, what Banesco tries is to put a round pin in a square space.
Mhm.
And we try to make it fit. It doesn't always do, but it works. And the first thing we're looking for is, who is the person? Is it somebody that we can work with? Is it somebody who wants to work with us for a long time? Is it a real relationship? That's the first thing we look at. And then the second thing, of course, is the viability of the project. What is the income stream that, as I think Ariel mentioned before, we look at the income stream. Are you capable of servicing the loan? Then we're looking, of course, at the loan to value. What is the value of the project? What is the real value of the project? And how much can we lend to the value of that project? And then you have the matter of the interest rates, which is a very difficult issue both for the bank and for the borrower, especially as some people believe that over the next couple of years, interest rates will go up. So the banks don't want to lend too low, and the borrower doesn't want to pay too much. And that's where both of them have to find the balance between the rate and the term. Do I want to borrow for 3 years? Do I want to borrow for 5 years? And the bank says, well, I'll lend you for 5 years, but that's a different rate when I lend you for 3 years. So those are all discussions that you want to understand. And when it comes to construction, you want to give the client some time to only pay interest and not principal until the project start producing. But the one thing I can tell you at Banesco is that we try to work with the client, and we try to understand the client, we try to understand the needs. And the first thing we try to do is make it work. It doesn't always work that way because it doesn't always match the client expectations with the bank's expectation. But what we're looking for is trying to make it work.
Well, that's got to be the most refreshing aspect of that, trying to make it work. I think that's, a lot of us have worked with different financial institutions, and it's always been, sorry, you don't fit in the box, next. The one good thing is that I have seen is that our board of directors, our leadership, our SBA lenders, the one good thing is that the relationship, I do feel, is everything. The relationship with all of these partners is everything to our commercial real estate community.
If I may add to that,
By all
is
means.
when we, I'm on the board of directors, and I'm a member of the board loan committee, and we meet every 2 weeks and we look at a lot of loans. One of the things we look at, who is the accountant they work with? Who is the attorney? Is it somebody we have an experience with, or we're comfortable with? So we look at our partners, and I'm so happy to have these partners who I didn't know personally before. But next time we have a loan and they represent one of the borrowers or the potential borrowers, it's a plus because we know that we know the people. So it's very important to know who the borrower works with.
Oh, Andre, yes.
I gotta jump in and say I agree. And I have to say, on my side, we see it going the other way. We were talking about it earlier, that I've got clients, especially a lot of non-US clients, and they can't get a bank loan because most banks, cookie cutter, will just say, if you're not a US person with a US social security number, it's a no. I don't want to hear anything. It's just a no. And we look and say, but we have all the KYC, the know your client information that you could want. This money is not coming from a cartel. This is good money. They just don't live here. And when you come to a place like Banesco, you have a chance to present the KYC. You have flexibility, which we were saying before, to get someone who's going to look at you and say, can I partner with you as a human being? Can we make this work? Does the deal make sense? Not, no, you don't fit the cookie cutter. And so, I think for all of us as providers, that's important, that flexibility and that want to build a long-term relationship, and they're willing to sort of figure out how do we get there. So I just wanted to add it because it's really what you're saying. And we all feel that about each other because we work in this space and we rely on each other to make these deals happen. So I know I interrupted, but it was important.
No. Do you guys have any comments? Because this is wonderful. You know, at the end of the day, you know, a relationship is probably the most powerful, impactful thing you can actually do.
Oh, I want to add something on this topic.
Yes, let's do this.
Is that the one thing I recommend to clients of the borrow is be as transparent as possible.
Mhm.
And because Andre referred to the KYC, to know your customer. Banks have been deputized by the government to be their policemen.
Mhm.
There's an enormous expectation and pressures, fines, punishment that exist on banks if they let through dirty money. Not only if they let through dirty money, if they have procedures that might let dirty money get through. So there's a lot of pressure on the banks. And I happen to be the chairman of the compliance committee of Banesco. And when I started this job, I didn't have gray hair. I still had hair. But so what we see is sometimes we cannot do a loan, or we cannot open an account, or we have to close the account because the client is not transparent, doesn't want to tell us the whole truth. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes because I'm so busy, you know, the silly questions on where does the money come from? How did I make my money? And sometimes they may seem like silly questions, but unfortunately the banks are under tremendous pressures. And my attorney friend is lucky because right now those expectations are not yet on attorneys. They exist now on real estate brokers, especially on the residential side. They now have to, if it's a residential project which is paid in cash over $1 million, I think in Miami-Dade, it has to be vetted, and you have to do your KYC and all kinds of check, but the banks have to check everything. So it comes down to a relationship. When you go and see your banker and you want to borrow money, be as transparent as possible and so proactive, because the more proactive you are, the more open you are, the quicker it will go.
Thank you, Santa. Thank you. All right, just checking.
It's like the movie Bridesmaids.
It is, yeah. You know, we're just passing the mic. But but basically, you know, I think, you know, first off, I want to thank all of you for the insight that you have provided. I think it's been very impactful, very important for a lot of us to hear this. A lot of this information, even for myself, it was new information to hear a little bit from the litigation, the development, and the you know, the tax perspective. Again, everybody, the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that you have a wonderful relationship, transparent, proactive relationship with your team to make sure that anything in commercial real estate will be a success. Now, with that being said, I believe we have a few minutes available for any Q&A. If we have, if anybody in the audience has any questions for our panelists this afternoon.
Thank you. During COVID, my whole family came to get vaccinated. And most of them wanted to open bank accounts and they were not able to. Can you explain to me why it was so difficult?
Now, would that be personal, business, personal accounts? Would that be at any institution? Foreigners, yes. Of course. No, not a problem. And I could actually probably speak on that. Coming from a large institution myself, now working here at Banesco, there is a risk factor. The risk factor is the fact that it's very difficult for a lot of these institutions, and it comes with a lot of resources as well to try to do their investigation on that individual. The fact that these clients are international, you're crossing different type of laws and different type of regulation. A lot of the large institutions have decided that those type of clientele is not going to be their specified or their target audience. So unfortunately, that is an underserved demographic. The benefit is that you do still have partners in the community to assist your international clientele. Banesco is one of them. You know, we do offer for domestic business owners who are international clientele, they do have the ability to bank with their local branch for their business. But if they're international with an international business, Banesco has an international banking division that will be able to assist them and bank with them, and we can do things both in person and remote. So with that being said, just as Seno mentioned, banks are being, we are being police
Can I
officers.
ask, did you come to Banesco? Okay, so that's your answer. We don't open for any foreigners. I mean, it comes with a due diligence. Again, it come back to what I said earlier. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. So what is the source of your wealth? What is your source of money? Are you a politically exposed person? Do you have somebody that works for the local government or whatever? So it's not overnight we open the account. But my answer is, if you still haven't opened the account, just come and see Paul or one of his colleagues. And if you haven't any of those things that I mentioned, politically exposed or money is not kosher, as they say, come and see us.
Thank you.
Hear from you guys. You know, I want to buy a house and this is the area where, you know, we're kind of looking to invest. Would you guys say that it's a good idea to invest in the Hollandale area, Aventura area for future like homes? Or that's something that's going to be very expensive and, you know, it's going to get to the point where like young people like me and others are not able to afford in the future?
This is not my department. A residential realtor in the house somewhere?
No, but let me say something. First of
but-
all, when you want to move, you move here. You know what? When you know, I several times a week I pick up my grandkids from Hillel, the local Jewish school here, and one of the things I've seen this year compared to last year is that you have about 1,000 more cars picking up the kids because so many people from New York have moved here. And they want to be here. They want to be in Aventura. They don't want to be somewhere else. So where it comes to is, what are your financial resources? Can you afford living in Aventura or can you not? And it comes back to what you mentioned, is there are areas and there are efforts you're making and then maybe you can take off from here where it's more affordable. But at the end of the day, the first thing is when you move is, where do you want to live? Where do I have my family? Where I have my friends? Where do I work? And then you see if you can afford it or you cannot afford it. And if you cannot afford it, you go a little bit further. But you have wonderful developers that build to lower range houses.
Yeah, the 10,000 foot view of that is, if there's any real estate folks in the house, do you know when the best time to buy is? Yeah, 10 years ago, right? And the second best time to buy is right now, right? So, you know, if you can afford it, do it. My personal opinion is get as close to the water as you possibly can that has land, right? Condos, townhouses, if that's your thing, if you want that environment, rock on. But, you know, structures depreciate, right? The land appreciates, right? And so, in my opinion, you know, get as close to the water as you can. There's not any more land going to come over there, and pick up as much land as you can get, you know. And Ariel and I were looking at houses. I don't look at the bedrooms or the bathrooms. I look at the lot size. You know what I mean? Because that's, yeah. Well, we live in a market, again, a very blessed market. You know, I don't know if it's because I'm new here that it's still fresh on me, but I mean, even pre-COVID, we had 8% annual appreciation year over year since 2008, you know, to 2020. That's absurd. That doesn't happen in the rest of the country's average is 3.22%, right? And we're at 8 now with COVID. We're 20% year over year. That doesn't happen, you know? And so with more land, you know, the further east, the lower supply. It's just, again, 10,000 foot view. And there's still ways to buy real estate with, you know, affordable ways, you know, lower money down. You know, there's a few games that, you know, we can play that we can talk about without so many eyes in the room. But, you know, Ariel and I bought, you know, a townhouse with no money down, and, still weren't paying any PMI on it. There's ways, to do that. And our, friends at Markham, I'm sure can give you that advice too. But I would go as far east as you can, pick up as much land as you can. That's my basic belief.
So, oh yeah, Terry.
I have a couple of things. First of all, I think your point about the supply chain problem is, for everybody to know, is still a long ways to go. I wrote an article for Forbes magazine about 3 months ago, and when they asked me to write it, I laughed and I said, "Sure, it's coming." And so many people are like, "We really want to publish this?" I said, "Publish it." So I think that today, in the US, there is a tremendous amount of resources still in the United States that are untapped from US manufacturers. And I think it's an onus on all of us as individuals that we are building and constructing homes or buildings or whatever you're doing to look local, look within the continental United States for those assets. You may not be able to get the Frigidaire out of Mexico right now or wherever it's going to come, but there are manufacturers here that can do that. And then lastly, I just want to say how impressed I am with the way Banesco works. This is my first time here. And I think that the old way of doing banking has always been the right way to do banking. And I think that having a really strong team around any organization is a necessity. And I think having strong advisors around you, strong mentors, and transparency from the start to the end. And clearly, the teams that you guys put together and you live, and I agree with you from the banking side. I always say the first thing is the story. The second thing is numbers don't lie, right? So, and you've got to be able to have a good story to explain to the banker who in turn he can do it the right way to make the right judgment calls, but the numbers still have to be accurate.
Thank you, Terry. So with what Josh actually was mentioning in regards to purchasing East, just as a very simple story, my husband and I previously we were looking at also purchasing a home. Fort Lauderdale 3-2 was going for $780,000 for a 1,500 square foot home, right? We were coming from a studio apartment that the rent was moving up to $2,400 a month. So what did we do? We started looking at all the opportunistic communities that were going to be up and coming. We decided to move to Dania. We bought a piece of land. We actually constructed for $280,000 right off of US 1. The one thing that I have learned is that those opportunities, when you find it, grab it. So that's some feedback for you. This is a great neighborhood, but Dania Beach, Hollywood, Hallandale, these are still very good, well-positioned cities, geographically located. We're not even 15 minutes away from Aventura, 25, 30 minutes away from Miami, 15 minutes from Fort Lauderdale. The one thing is that with this crazy increase in prices, that's exactly what you see. So, I am a big proponent of looking in up and coming communities. It adds a lot of positive impact. Anybody else? Any other questions? No? All right. Oakland Park. Yes, everybody go visit Oakland Park.
I'm very pro development if it means more target.
Yeah, we just knocked down the last local strip club. So property values are rising. Sorry about that. I didn't know that was your watering hole, but it was pure platinum. Rest in peace. But if you do check it out on Google Maps, the 3D tour of the inside of the structure that's been demolished is still active. So kind of wanted to leave that on there as long as possible. So that way, everybody can reminisce. But, you mentioned that Oakland Park is in my eyes, the prime example of, my lovely wife grew up here. Okay. And she had in her mind that Oakland Park was a not so nice area because I guess when she was growing up here, it had that reputation. Now, I mean, it's gorgeous. If you haven't been in downtown Oakland Park recently, they've really used the development impact fees properly, which is something that I guess I forgot to talk about. But impact fees on developers, are what's collected by the cities to do, these offsite improvements to keep the roads wide enough to facilitate the traffic that, is being increased by the new units and all that stuff. And Oakland Park used it to put new fountains and sidewalks and walkable area, contracted with BSO and put new laws in place. City of Oakland Park, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And, they contracted BSO and they put in new laws to restrict, vagrancy and to keep, in their motto, keep Oakland Park beautiful. And there's parks, there's a lot of free open parking. And, Oakland Park city borders are 1 mile from the beach, right? And they wrap around 95. 10 minutes to Las Olas, 10 minutes to Pompano. 20 minutes to Boca, and I don't know how long to Aventura because I try not to come down here as much as possible. But, and you can still get, you were talking about houses in there for $300,000-$400,000, nice size homes, lots, at reasonable rates. And, there are still some communities like that. Right now, in what I think is prompting, the increase in those values, like your house in Dania, is some of the other development going on in Dania Beach, right? You're 1 block off of US 1 right now. On US 1, there are new hotels, new apartment buildings, restaurants going up all over the place. Dania Point is a little bit further west, but yeah, it's a prime example. Davie, I think, is one of the coolest stories. I've only been here 4 years, and in the 4 years that I've been here to see, on Davie, just drive down Davie Road, Nexus, Wawa, brand new JAE owned Wendy's, national credit tenants on Davie Road, 5-story apartment buildings or ground floor retail, condos. There were condos on Davie Road and they're sold out, right? Residential condos or ground floor retail. Level actually was contracted by Azure Equities, who's a local developer here, to sell retail condos over there. We were hired in October, went live in December, and we're completely out of inventory by February. There's such a need and a thirst for this new product, right? To replace a lot of the older stuff. And, building a new home in Dania, Davie, Oakland Park, I think that, if you can go, maybe not Davie, a little bit further east than Davie, you might, do very well. Yeah, and apparently Paul can build it for you for $280,000.
That was it. Remember, supply chain. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Well, if we don't have any other questions for our panelists this evening, what we'll do is we'll wrap up the panel and we'll enjoy some cocktails and some light hors d'oeuvres. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.